Prince Edward has spoken out as his brother Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor faces mounting Epstein allegations. Let's go live now to Ben Downey in London.
Prince Edward's legal team has just confirmed a revelation that is quietly shaking the very foundations of the monarchy, exposing an inheritance twist few saw coming. For decades, the royal family has weathered scandals, secrets, and carefully managed narratives, always keeping internal disputes far from public view. But this time, something far more delicate is surfacing. Documents, claims, and tensions that threaten to disrupt long-standing arrangements. So how did a private family matter spiral into what insiders are calling a full-blown royal crisis? Stay with us. The Quiet Prince and the hidden power behind a royal title. So who is Prince Edward? And why has his name suddenly moved from the background into the center of a growing royal storm? To understand that, you have to look beyond the silence that has long defined him and into a story shaped not by noise, but by patience, timing, and deeply rooted history. For decades, Edward existed almost out of sight, a rare figure in a family constantly watched. As the youngest son of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, he grew up surrounded by louder personalities and heavier expectations. While King Charles III prepared for the throne, Princess Anne built a reputation for tireless duty, and Prince Andrew often found himself in headlines. Edward chose a different path, one that avoided spectacle entirely. Even his marriage to Sophie Rhys-Jones in 1999 reflected that same calm approach, steady, respectful, and far from dramatic. But what once made him easy to overlook is now exactly what makes his position so compelling. The turning point came on September 8, 2022, when the passing of the Queen reshaped the monarchy in ways both visible and hidden. Titles shifted, responsibilities changed, and control over key royal assets quietly tightened under the authority of the new king. Yet beneath that surface transition, something more complex was unfolding, something tied directly to Edward's current title, Duke of Edinburgh. This title is not just ceremonial. Its roots stretch back through centuries of British legal tradition, carrying with it layers of meaning that go far beyond prestige. It has been created, dissolved, and revived multiple times, each version shaped by specific legal frameworks. The most recent and perhaps most significant form was established in 1947, when King George VII granted it to Prince Philip ahead of his marriage. That moment was not merely symbolic. It was supported by formal legal instruments designed to preserve influence, rights, and structure far into the future. And that is where the story takes an unexpected turn. In the months following the Queen's death, Edward's legal advisors reportedly began examining historical documents, letters patent, trust arrangements, and long-standing succession agreements. What they found appears to challenge assumptions about how certain estates and interests were meant to be managed. These are the same assets that had quickly been drawn under centralized control through institutions like the Crown Estate and other royal holdings. What makes this situation so striking is not just the legal complexity, but the man at the center of it. Edward, long viewed as the monarchy's most unassuming figure, now stands connected to a web of history that could quietly reshape how royal inheritance is understood. And perhaps that is the real surprise, not sudden drama, but the slow, steady emergence of a figure who was never meant to dominate the spotlight, now holding a role that may prove far more powerful than anyone expected. When Prince Philip passed in April 2021, the Dukedom of Edinburgh didn't simply transfer, it quietly returned to the crown. But what unseen decisions and careful intentions shaped its future? And why had whispers long pointed to Prince Edward as its eventual heir? The hidden crown clause. When Prince Philip passed away in April 2021, something unusual happened behind palace walls. His famous title did not simply move to the next in line. It quietly returned to the crown, suspended in a state few outside royal circles truly understand. While the public mourned, a quieter process began, shaped not just by tradition, but by careful intention from Queen Elizabeth II herself. For years, those close to the monarchy had whispered that the Dukedom of Edinburgh was destined for her youngest son, Prince Edward. It was never about urgency, but timing. That moment arrived during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee in 2022, when Edward and Sophie formally stepped into their new roles. To many, it felt like a heartfelt tribute, a continuation of Philip's legacy placed in trusted hands. Yet beneath the surface, the title carried more than symbolic weight. Hidden within the original 1947 legal documents that created the title are detailed provisions, rules that go beyond ceremony. These documents, reinforced over decades, outline connections between the title and certain rights tied to property, finances, and inheritance structures. They are not vague traditions, but formal legal frameworks, and according to interpretations now surfacing, they may still hold force today. This is where the calm exterior of royal tradition begins to shift. After the passing of Queen Elizabeth II in September 2022, King Charles III moved quickly to organize and centralize royal assets. On the surface, it appeared to be a natural transition of power. But legal experts connected to Edward's camp suggest that some of these decisions may not have fully considered the earlier agreements tied to the Edinburgh title. At the center of this growing complexity are two of the most iconic royal residences, Balmoral Castle and Sandringham House. Unlike official residences such as Buckingham Palace, these estates are privately owned. Balmoral, purchased in 1852 by Prince Albert, and Sandringham, acquired later by King Edward VII, have long existed outside the formal Crown estate structure. That distinction changes everything. Private estates follow different legal paths, meaning their transfer is governed not by public tradition, but by personal ownership and documented agreements. If the provisions linked to the Edinburgh title remain valid, they could, under certain interpretations, influence how rights connected to these estates are viewed today. What emerges is not a simple story of inheritance, but a layered narrative of tradition meeting law. Titles, once seen as ceremonial, reveal hidden depths when examined closely. And as these details continue to surface, they raise a compelling question about how much of the monarchy's past still quietly shapes its present. Beneath the polished image of royal tradition, a complex reality quietly unfolded, shaped not by ceremony, but by legal rules that lingered long after ownership changed. What secrets within these private estates threatened to surface, and how could long-buried instructions ignite tensions no one expected? The hidden clauses that could reshape a royal legacy. Quietly, beneath the polished image of royal tradition, a far more complicated reality has been unfolding. One written not in ceremony, but in legal language that refuses to fade with time. Private estates tied to the monarchy are never as simple as they appear. They carry conditions, obligations, and carefully crafted instructions that continue to hold power long after ownership shifts. And in this case, those buried details may be impossible to ignore. Although the will of Queen Elizabeth II remains sealed from public view, as is customary, not every document connected to her estate is hidden. Certain legal instruments, trust deeds, structured agreements, and provisions linked to royal titles still exist in accessible form. Within these papers lies the foundation of a growing dispute that is less about family tension and more about binding law. At the heart of the matter is the title of Duke of Edinburgh, now held by Prince Edward. According to legal interpretations attributed to his advisors, this title may carry more than ceremonial weight. It is said to include defined financial rights, particularly relating to income generated from specific royal assets. Even more striking is the suggestion of a reversionary interest, meaning that under certain conditions, portions of estate holdings could revert or benefit the title holder in ways that cannot simply be dismissed. This interpretation changes everything. It suggests that when the title was formally granted, it may have been tied to real, enforceable benefits, carefully documented and intended to endure. These are not symbolic privileges. They are legal entitlements, written with precision and expectation. The timing of this revelation adds another layer of tension. Following September 2022, after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, King Charles III began making significant decisions about royal estate management. Reports point to efforts to centralize income streams under the Duchy of Lancaster, along with strategic adjustments to estates like Sandringham Estate and Balmoral Castle. These moves were seen as part of a broader modernization effort, but they may have overlooked a critical detail. If the legal claims are accurate, then some of those decisions could conflict directly with the rights now associated with the Edinburgh title. And that is where the situation becomes particularly serious. This is no longer about interpretation or tradition. It is about whether established legal provisions were fully considered before major restructuring took place. Sources close to the matter suggest that Prince Edward's legal team has taken a firm stance. Their position is clear. The rights in question are not speculative. They exist in writing, supported by formal documentation, and are capable of being defended under the law. In a system where history and legality are deeply intertwined, the written word carries immense weight. And now, those words, quietly drafted years ago, may be strong enough to challenge decisions made at the very highest level. The palace's silent reaction spoke louder than any statement, exposing tensions long hidden behind carefully measured words. What exactly was happening behind the scenes, and how would the quiet maneuvers of King Charles III's inner circle spark a crisis the public had no idea was coming? The silence behind the crown. The palace received the message, and the reaction, though unspoken, echoed louder than any public statement ever could. Instead of clarity, there was a familiar stillness, the kind that wraps itself in legal phrasing and careful distance, as though complexity alone might slow the story down. For years, that approach protected the monarchy, but this time something refused to fade. Behind the scenes, a quieter, more serious process had already begun. Long before the public sensed anything unusual, representatives connected to King Charles III and Prince Edward were reportedly engaged in tightly controlled discussions. These were not simple family exchanges, but deliberate legal conversations, shaped by documents drafted years earlier, documents that may now carry unexpected weight. What makes this moment especially striking is not what has been said, but what hasn't. The palace, known for guiding narratives with precision, has responded with unusual restraint. No strong denials, no reassuring explanations, just carefully measured words, released sparingly, as if each sentence must pass through layers of legal caution before reaching the public. That caution hints at something deeper. Institutions rarely revisit their legal foundations unless something unsettles them. And by all indications, something did. Reports suggest that an internal legal review was quietly launched, urgent, thorough, and deliberately out of sight. Such actions are not taken lightly. They suggest the possibility that earlier assumptions may no longer hold. To understand the tension, one has to look back briefly. In 2022, Queen Elizabeth II granted Edward the title of Duke of Edinburgh, a decision seen at the time as both symbolic and secure. Yet within months, everything changed. The Queen passed away, and Charles ascended the throne, inheriting not just the crown, but control over royal estates and decisions that would shape the monarchy's future. Those decisions, made during a period of transition, now appear to be under quiet scrutiny. By late 2023 and moving into early 2024, Edward's legal team had reportedly completed a detailed review. Their findings, once delivered, seemed to shift the atmosphere within royal circles. Observers began noticing subtle changes, fewer shared public moments, a cooler tone between the brothers, and a growing sense of distance that had not been there before. Through it all, Edward and Sophie continued their duties with steady composure, maintaining the image of calm continuity. Yet the space around them feels different now, more guarded, more deliberate. And perhaps the most telling sign lies in the palace's silence. Not the usual strategic quiet, but a more careful, almost cautious stillness, as if speaking too freely could carry consequences. That kind of silence does not come from confidence, it comes from uncertainty, which leaves one question lingering in the background, quietly but persistently. What, exactly, might Prince Edward now be entitled to? And why does the answer seem to matter more than ever? Royal life often looks polished, but beneath it lies immense wealth, land, and influence. How did historic agreements shape control over estates like Sandringham? and what hidden battles over ownership and power were quietly unfolding behind the crown's public image. The quiet battle over millions. The real weight of this situation is impossible to overlook. Behind the polished image of royal life lies something far more concrete: land, income, and vast financial influence quietly tied to historic agreements. This is not a simple family misunderstanding. It is a question of ownership, control, and rights that may stretch deeper than anyone expected. Consider the scale first. In Norfolk, the Sandringham estate spreads across nearly 20,000 acres, a mix of farmland, forests, rental homes, and commercial spaces that generate steady income through agriculture and tourism. Its value, often placed between £50 million and £200 million, only tells part of the story. What makes it more intriguing is that when Queen Elizabeth II passed it down, the full legal framework behind that transfer remained sealed, leaving room for interpretation. Then, there is Balmoral in Aberdeenshire, even larger at about 50,000 acres. Beyond its well-known castle, the estate includes working land, forestry operations, and traditional sporting grounds. Estimates suggest it exceeds £100 million in value. Like Sandringham, it was privately inherited under conditions that have never been fully disclosed. These estates are not just symbols of heritage, they are active financial systems. Yet the land itself may only be one layer. Beneath it sits a network of trusts, long-standing financial arrangements, and historic entitlements that can remain attached to titles for generations. This is where the Dukedom of Edinburgh becomes especially significant. When King Charles III formally recreated the title for Prince Edward in 2023, it carried a legal history that may include obligations not easily set aside. The core of the current dispute does not challenge the throne or the line of succession. Instead, it focuses on whether specific rights linked to that title, rights believed to have been structured during Queen Elizabeth II's lifetime, still hold legal force. According to Edward's legal team, these are not informal understandings, but enforceable provisions, possibly tied to income streams or property interests. In legal terms, the argument turns on whether these provisions qualify as binding obligations, commitments that remain in place regardless of who holds ultimate authority. If that interpretation stands, it could mean that certain financial benefits or controls cannot simply be absorbed or redirected, even by the monarch. What makes this moment especially striking is the quiet seriousness surrounding it. There has been no public clash, no dramatic announcement, yet the careful response from the palace hints at a deep awareness of the stakes. Lawyers have reportedly examined decades of documents, tracing decisions made long before the current reign began. And so, what appears on the surface as a contained disagreement may, in reality, touch on something much larger: the balance between tradition and law, between inherited power and documented rights. Within those sealed agreements and historic titles could lie answers that reshape not only one arrangement, but the understanding of royal authority itself. The British monarchy once relied on tradition, discretion, and public trust to keep scrutiny at bay. But what forces are now challenging that carefully guarded image, and how will measured, behind-the-scenes actions reshape the royal narrative in ways no one could have predicted? When the crown meets the law. We are living in an age where even the most respected institutions are expected to explain themselves. For generations, the British monarchy stood firmly on tradition, careful messaging, and the deep trust of the public. That approach kept sensitive matters far from the spotlight, allowing the palace to function without constant questioning. But over time, especially after the events surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle around 2020, that shield has weakened and curiosity has grown stronger. Now, attention has shifted in a different direction, not driven by emotional interviews or public statements, but by something far more measured and difficult to ignore: legal documents. Prince Edward's legal team has stepped forward with detailed arguments rooted in property law, presenting claims that are calm in tone yet powerful in meaning. These are not dramatic accusations. They are structured challenges built on rules that apply to everyone, regardless of status. At the center of this unfolding situation lies a simple but striking idea. No institution, no matter how historic, stands above the law. The monarchy, often seen as a symbol of continuity and authority, is now being viewed through a more modern lens, one that demands fairness, clarity, and accountability. Legal experts are paying close attention because this is not just about one individual or a single disagreement. It could reveal deeper issues about how royal assets are handled and protected. For decades, systems within the palace were assumed to be solid and unquestionable. Yet the arguments now being presented suggest that some of these frameworks may not be as secure as once believed. If the claims hold weight, it could mean that certain rights or properties were not managed with the precision that modern legal standards require. That possibility alone is enough to spark intense discussion, both inside and outside royal circles. What makes this moment particularly significant is the way it reflects a broader shift in society. People are no longer satisfied with silence or tradition as an explanation. They want to understand how decisions are made, especially when they involve power, wealth, and legacy. The idea that royal matters should remain hidden simply because they always have been is steadily fading. As this situation continues to develop, it raises important questions. How will the monarchy respond if the legal arguments prove valid? Can long-standing traditions adapt to meet today's expectations without losing their identity? And perhaps most importantly, what does this mean for the future of an institution that has spent centuries carefully guarding its inner workings? The answers are not yet clear. But one thing is certain. This is no longer just a private matter. It is a moment that could redefine how the monarchy operates in a world that is watching more closely than ever before. On the surface, everything seems calm, yet beneath, forces are quietly shifting. Which path will unfold? Discreet resolution, private negotiations, or a public reckoning? And how might these choices reshape a family, its legacy, and the carefully constructed image the world believes it sees? The quiet claim that shook the crown. There are moments when everything appears calm on the surface, yet beneath that calm, something significant is shifting. This situation carries that exact feeling, with three possible directions ahead, each one capable of reshaping more than just a private family matter. The most expected outcome is a discreet resolution, carefully handled away from public attention. In such a case, discussions would unfold quietly, adjustments would be agreed upon, and a revised structure would take shape. Perhaps involving financial rights, estate oversight, or formal acknowledgement of long-standing entitlements. To the outside world, it would all seem seamless, marked only by carefully worded statements about unity and shared purpose. Even so, a quiet agreement would speak volumes. It would suggest that the legal position being asserted was too substantial to overlook. It would also hint that earlier decisions, possibly dating back to the early years of King Charles's reign after 2022, may not have fully addressed every legal detail. Such an outcome would not create open conflict, but it would quietly confirm that even within the highest levels of tradition, oversights can happen. Yet there is a second path, far less comfortable and far more public. If private negotiations fail, the matter could move into a formal legal setting. That would introduce a level of exposure the monarchy has long avoided. Court proceedings could bring forward documents, agreements, and legal interpretations that have remained hidden for decades. It would not simply be a disagreement. It would be a rare moment where long-standing royal structures are examined under modern legal scrutiny. And in such a setting, the law does not bend for status or history. That reality alone gives this possibility its weight, even if it remains unlikely. Then comes the third possibility, quieter in appearance, but potentially more far-reaching. Regardless of how the issue is resolved, it could lead to a broader reassessment of how royal assets are defined, protected, and documented. Questions could emerge about clarity, accountability, and the systems that have governed these arrangements for generations. In a more serious turn, such discussions might even attract attention beyond palace walls, especially if large financial figures become part of wider conversations. At the center of it all is a single, undeniable point. The entitlements in question have been confirmed as legitimate, recorded, and enforceable. That fact alone shifts the balance of the situation and explains why it cannot simply be dismissed. What makes this development even more striking is the figure behind it. Prince Edward has long been known for his steady, reserved presence. A royal who avoided controversy and remained focused on duty. For decades, he stood apart from the noise that often surrounded the family. Yet now, his approach has taken a different form. Not dramatic or confrontational, but deliberate and precise. By turning to legal review and allowing those findings to stand, he has introduced a new kind of pressure, one built not on emotion, but on evidence. And so the story now rests in a place the monarchy rarely occupies, a space of uncertainty, where the outcome matters no matter how quietly it is resolved. The monarchy's unwritten rules once ruled in silence, but now law has entered the room. What shift broke tradition's grip, and how will this new documented power reshape a world long protected by quiet authority? A royal shift. No one can ignore. A line has been crossed, not with noise or spectacle, but with something far more lasting: law. Behind palace doors, where quiet understanding once guided every move, a new kind of language is now taking hold. It is precise, documented, and impossible to dismiss. For generations, the monarchy moved within an unwritten code, where tradition held more power than paper and decisions rarely faced open challenges. That world, however, is no longer untouched. By early 2026, what had long been handled through custom began to face a sharper kind of scrutiny. Legal frameworks, financial clarity, and documented rights have stepped into a space once ruled by silence. This shift is subtle on the surface, yet deeply significant beneath it. Even if the matter settles quietly within palace walls, the impact will remain. Adjustments would have been made, acknowledgments forced, and once unquestioned practices reconsidered. These are not changes that simply disappear. At the center of this turning point stands Prince Edward, a figure rarely associated with disruption. For years, he has been viewed as steady and reserved, someone who worked without drawing attention. Yet in this moment, without raising his voice or stepping into public confrontation, he has done something remarkably powerful. Through careful documentation and a firm legal stance, he has created a situation the institution cannot ignore. It is not dramatic, but it is decisive. What makes this development so compelling is not just the issue itself, but what it represents. This is no longer about land, titles, or financial arrangements alone. It reflects a deeper transformation, one where tradition must now answer to legal clarity. The monarchy, long defined by control and discretion, finds itself navigating a space where paperwork carries as much weight as legacy. If the situation were to escalate, the consequences could reach far beyond those directly involved. Public curiosity would intensify, questions would multiply, and the long-held belief that royal affairs remain sealed could face another serious challenge. Even without full disclosure, the mere existence of such a legal stance shifts perception. It suggests that the system, no matter how structured, is not beyond question. London, often seen as the heart of royal continuity, now becomes the backdrop to something quieter yet more profound, a recalibration of power. This is not a sudden upheaval, but a steady, undeniable shift. It reveals that influence within the monarchy is no longer shaped solely by tradition, but increasingly by the strength of legal grounding. In the end, whether resolved behind closed doors or brought into wider view, the message has already been delivered. The balance between tradition and law has changed, and once that balance shifts, it rarely returns to what it once was. So what do you think is really behind this shocking inheritance twist shaking the royal family? Hidden secrets or long-buried tensions? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe,